Welcome back to another deep dive. I am genuinely thrilled that you are here joining us today.
It is great to be here, especially given the sheer depth of the materials we're working through today.
Exactly. And you know the premise of our time together. We take a massive stack of varied, completely anonymous sources.
Right. We're talking clinical research notes, transcribed psychological lectures.
Deep philosophical texts, behavioral data.
Yeah.
And we distill it all down.
We filter out the noise.
Yes, to extract the absolute most important nuggets of knowledge and insight. It's a shortcut to being deeply well-informed.
And today, we are pointing the magnifying glass inward.
We really are. It's a profound exploration into the hidden mechanics of the human mind. Specifically, we're going to look at how invisible subconscious programming is dictating the architecture of your reality.
Your relationships, your success.
The recurring patterns you deal with every single day, the limits you feel right at this very moment.
That is precisely the mission for today's deep dive.
Yeah.
We are going to decode how early childhood experiences systematically build what the sources refer to as an invisible pilot.
An invisible pilot. I love that term.
It's incredibly accurate. It is a hidden, highly efficient internal navigator that steers our adult lives from entirely behind the curtain.
And we're going to examine the mechanics of why we face the exact same recurring tests and frustrations year after year.
Almost like a localized Groundhog Day.
Yes. But more importantly, we're going to uncover the practical, step-by-step methodologies found in the literature.
Methods for aligning our deepest emotional core, our conscious thoughts, and our physical actions.
Because the ultimate goal outlined in these texts is unlocking dormant human potential.
And I think it is vital to emphasize right at the outset here, what we are discussing today is not abstract armchair psychology.
No, not at all.
This is the precise structural blueprint of our daily struggles. It is about understanding the deep why behind the invisible limits we all feel.
And learning the operational steps to dismantle them. What struck me immediately in the research is how it just strips away the mystery of our own self-sabotage.
It really does. It removes the guesswork.
Because we have all had those moments of deep frustration where we look at our own behavior and think, why on earth do I keep dating the exact same type of emotionally unavailable person?
Or why do I continually hit this invisible income ceiling?
Right, and then suddenly find a way to blow all my savings. The materials today promise to answer those exact questions.
And the foundational concept they present to answer them is the idea of the blank slate.
The blank slate during the first 7 years of life.
Exactly. The texts explain that a human being is born with a mind that is completely open and utterly unshielded.
Between the ages of 0 and 7, the logical, analytical, critical thinking faculties of the brain.
What we would eventually call the prefrontal cortex.
Right. Those faculties simply haven't come online yet.
They do not exist functionally in a young child.
So because of that structural reality, a young child absorbs their environment not as a set of subjective opinions or, flawed human behaviors.
They absorb it as absolute, unquestionable objective truth.
And the biological and evolutionary necessity behind this blank slate period is truly fascinating when you dig into the research.
It is, because the brain of a human child is fundamentally wired for one singular imperative above all else.
Attachment.
Attachment. If you think about it from an evolutionary standpoint, a human infant is uniquely vulnerable.
A foal can walk hours after birth.
But a human child requires years of intensive care just to survive.
So to ensure survival, to secure their place within the family unit, the child must seamlessly download the caregiver's worldview.
They are downloading the economic values, the social dynamics, the moral codes.
And the baseline emotional frequency of the home.
Yes, the emotional frequency is key. They do not possess the cognitive firewall required to filter this data.
Right. A 5-year-old cannot step back and say, well, my parents are currently exhibiting extreme stress regarding our financial situation due to shifting macroeconomic factors.
Or their own unresolved trauma.
Exactly. The child's brain simply records the emotional frequency of the home and writes it into their foundational source code.
Looking at the data provided on how this code is written, let's trace a highly specific scenario regarding financial programming.
Because it makes this abstract concept incredibly tangible.
Imagine a child growing up in a home where money is the constant looming source of stress.
It's the subject of hushed, tense arguments at the kitchen table late at night.
There is a pervasive, heavy feeling of lack.
A sense that the other shoe is always about to drop.
Because the child's brain is in that unshielded, highly suggestible state, it internalizes a very specific operational code.
It writes a program that says money equals danger.
Or money is the root of conflict and instability in my tribe.
Conversely, if a child is raised in an environment where resources flow easily,
Where finances are never spoken of with anxiety or tension.
the child's internal software simply registers wealth is natural.
Wealth is just the safe, unremarkable background noise of daily life.
Exactly. And the critical variable here is that this downloaded code becomes fully subconscious.
It sinks completely beneath the level of conscious awareness once that child grows into adulthood.
That adult might go out and read every financial literacy book on the market.
They might consciously and desperately desire wealth, stability, and success,
They might even land a high-paying job.
but their invisible pilot,
That deeply entrenched 0 to 7 year programming,
that pilot views wealth as a fundamental threat to the family bond.
or as an inevitable trigger for pain and conflict.
So what does the pilot do?
Its job is to keep the organism safe based on its original outdated definition of safety.
It subtly steers the plane away from the wealth,
It orchestrates a bad investment
a sudden loss of motivation.
or a catastrophic interpersonal conflict at work.
It ensures the person returns to their baseline of financial stress.
Because to the primitive brain, that stress is familiar,
And the familiar equates to survival.
which naturally bridges into what the texts call the child-adult phenomenon.
This is one of the more confronting concepts we have to explore today.
It really is. The sources define the child-adult as someone who is walking around in a fully matured body,
Holding down a demanding job,
paying a mortgage,
perhaps even raising children of their own,
but who is fundamentally, at their core, making major life decisions based on the terror of what their parents will think.
or the inherited culture that shaped them.
Right. They are making career choices, choosing romantic partners, dictating their financial ceilings, purely to maintain the invisible, lingering approval of their childhood environment.
It makes you look at your own life and wonder how many of your supposed choices are actually just compliance with an invisible script.
It is a profound realization when an individual recognizes the child-adult within themselves.
If we connect this to the broader mechanics of human self-sabotage, it explains a tremendous amount of seemingly irrational behavior.
The literature delves deeply into how children, due to their developmental stage, are inherently egocentric,
They perceive themselves as the literal center of the universe.
meaning they believe every event in their environment happens because of them.
If parents separate, or if there is severe ambient conflict in the home, the child almost universally internalizes the blame.
The subconscious narrative becomes, if I had been quieter,
If I had been less demanding.
if I had been a better child, this family would not be fractured.
The concept of hidden penance that stems from this egocentrism is just staggering.
The research provides this incredibly detailed, painful trajectory of how this plays out over decades.
Let's look at a scenario. Say a child harbors this hidden egocentric guilt over a messy divorce that occurred when they were 5 years old.
Fast forward 30 years.
As a 35-year-old adult, they continuously, almost systematically, sabotage their own chances at romantic happiness or a stable marriage.
They find flaws in every perfect partner.
Or they become completely emotionally unavailable the moment a relationship becomes serious.
And if a friend asks them why they are still single, they will effortlessly produce a perfectly rational, adult-sounding defense.
They will say, I just haven't found anyone who meets my standards.
Or I am prioritizing my career right now.
Or the institution of marriage is an outdated economic contract anyway.
And they genuinely believe these rationalizations.
They have absolutely zero conscious awareness that they're actually serving a self-imposed, subconscious prison sentence.
To pay off a fabricated debt they took on when they were in kindergarten.
This is precisely why sheer willpower, or the modern obsession with superficial positive thinking, so frequently fails to produce lasting behavioral change.
When you rely solely on willpower, you are attempting to use the conscious mind to overpower the invisible pilot.
And the cognitive sciences suggest the conscious mind accounts for perhaps 5% of your overall neurological processing.
While the invisible pilot has a firm grip on the other 95%.
The pilot has its hands tightly on the yoke, aggressively steering you away from the healthy marriage,
Away from the career visibility.
away from financial independence.
All to honor an archaic, deeply buried contract of guilt or loyalty to a childhood environment that no longer exists.
The conscious mind is essentially a passenger yelling directions at a pilot who refuses to listen.
It fundamentally changes how we view personal development.
It isn't just about adding new skills,
It's about decrypting old software.
which perfectly leads into the next major theme of the materials.
How do we actually begin to separate from this programming?
Because the sources are emphatically clear that this process of separation is not a peaceful, Zen-like experience,
No, it requires navigating the intense friction of healthy boundaries.
and confronting what they term the absolute necessity of guilt.
The concept of individuation is central here, the psychological process of separating your distinct identity from the enmeshed family mass.
Personal growth is frequently marketed as a beautiful, linear journey of reading enlightening books and feeling increasingly peaceful.
But the reality detailed in these clinical and philosophical texts is that genuine structural growth inevitably triggers severe internal conflict.
Specifically, it requires the conflict of separating from the deep-seated expectations of your family unit or your inherited cultural paradigm.
You simply cannot actualize your full authentic potential while simultaneously remaining perfectly compliant to the restrictive rules of your early programming.
The two states are mutually exclusive.
And this introduces a profound reframe on a very difficult, universally despised emotion, guilt.
Society conditions us to interpret guilt as an objective moral compass,
We are taught that if we feel guilty, it inherently means we have done something wrong.
that we have committed an ethical violation.
But the sources argue that in the context of psychological separation and personal development, guilt serves an entirely different function.
When you draw a healthy boundary,
When you finally say no to an endlessly demanding employer,
when you set a firm limit with an emotionally intrusive parent,
or when you refuse to absorb a romantic partner's anxiety.
that action will almost inevitably trigger a crushing physiological wave of guilt.
To understand why doing the healthy thing feels so neurologically terrible, we have to look at the mechanics of the invisible pilot again.
When you set that boundary, you are flagrantly breaking a primary rule of your childhood survival.
Which was typically some variation of be obedient,
Do not disrupt the peace.
or always put the needs of the caregivers above your own.
By saying no, you are stepping out of the recognized, safe parameters of the family system.
Therefore, the guilt you experience in that moment is not a signal of moral failure.
It is a symptom of psychological separation.
It is the physiological friction of your invisible pilot fighting desperately to regain control.
Your amygdala is sounding the alarm, flooding your nervous system with stress hormones.
Essentially screaming, warning, you are defying the tribe. This behavior will result in exile and death.
That is such a vital distinction. The guilt is not a moral failing. It is the friction of individuation.
What the literature emphasizes here as a core takeaway is that true maturity, becoming a sovereign adult rather than a child adult, is defined by the ability to endure that healthy guilt without capitulating.
You have to build the emotional tolerance to feel that crushing weight in your chest.
That tightness in your throat when you enforce a boundary.
And instead of immediately retreating back into your comfort zone to make the terrifying feeling stop, you hold your ground.
You stand firmly in the center of your own life, tolerating the intense somatic discomfort of being an independent entity.
Precisely. If you instantly cave in, if you say yes to the unreasonable demand simply to alleviate the immediate physiological pressure of the guilt,
You are actively reinforcing the invisible pilot's dominance.
you are confirming its hypothesis that independence is too painful to sustain.
However, the materials do not just leave us with the mandate to suffer through the guilt,
They offer a highly detailed, actionable mechanism for metabolizing it.
particularly the lingering toxic guilt associated with the hidden penance we discussed earlier.
The texts refer to this mechanism as constructive atonement,
Constructive atonement. This is where the theory gets incredibly practical.
because historically, when we carry deep, unresolved guilt, our default setting is passive self-punishment.
We exact a heavy toll on our own lives. We subconsciously deny ourselves career success.
We tolerate abusive treatment in our relationships.
Or we physically neglect our health.
We sit in a state of psychological self-flagellation that serves absolutely no one.
The sources suggest a complete inversion of this process.
They advocate moving from passive, destructive self-punishment to active, constructive atonement.
The subconscious mind operates heavily on the principle of transactional equity.
If it believes a debt is owed, whether that is a genuine debt from a past behavioral mistake or the fabricated egocentric guilt of childhood, it demands payment.
Constructive atonement provides a tangible receipt of payment.
The method requires you to consciously acknowledge the guilt, and then assign yourself a specific, finite period to execute deliberate acts of positive contribution.
Let's ground this in a practical example. Say you recognize you are carrying the heavy, nebulous guilt of feeling like you disappointed your parents by not pursuing the career path they demanded.
Instead of punishing yourself by failing at your chosen career, you make a conscious, binding agreement with your own subconscious.
You dictate terms. You might say, for the next 6 months, I am going to dedicate 3 hours every Saturday to mentoring underprivileged youth.
Or, I'm going to spend my weekends volunteering at a local nature reserve, actively restoring the environment.
By channeling that trapped, guilty energy into kinetic, positive action in the external world, you are speaking to the subconscious in the only language it truly respects.
Undeniable physical action and consequence.
It is a brilliant psychological intervention because it bypasses the endless loop of cognitive rationalization.
You are not trying to convince your subconscious that the guilt is illogical.
You are simply paying the perceived debt in a currency that improves the world.
Once the specifically assigned period of constructive atonement is completed, the critical final step is to formally declare the debt settled.
You must grant yourself absolute, unequivocal permission to move forward without the invisible ankle weights. You close the ledger.
It is an incredibly liberating framework.
But what makes this deep dive so expansive is that the sources do not merely confine these concepts to our internal psychological landscape.
They take this internal reality and project it directly onto the external world we navigate every single day.
This bridges us into a fascinating perspective on how our reality operates.
The materials present the idea that the external world is not a random, chaotic sequence of disconnected events and interpersonal collisions.
Instead, they propose that the external world functions as a highly sensitive feedback loop.
A living, breathing mirror that is constantly reading our deeply held subconscious beliefs and perfectly reflecting them back to us.
To ground this concept of the mirror in recognized psychological mechanisms, we can look at the function of the reticular activating system,
the RAS in the brain, alongside concepts like confirmation bias and repetition compulsion.
The brain is bombarded with millions of bits of sensory data every second,
It cannot process all of it,
Yeah.
so the RAS acts as a filter.
allowing only information that validates your deeply held subconscious beliefs to reach your conscious awareness.
Simultaneously, repetition compulsion is the psychological drive to unconsciously repeat traumatic or painful events from the past in an attempt to finally master them.
So, when the texts say the world is a mirror, it is a metaphorical way of describing how your neurology filters reality to accommodate your internal programming.
The sources categorize this feedback loop into 4 primary testing arenas.
Relationships, wealth, health, and courage.
These are the specific domains where your hidden limitations will inevitably be forced into the light.
Let's deeply examine how this mirror operates within these arenas because it completely reframes how we view adversity.
Let's look at the arena of relationships.
If your invisible pilot was programmed with a core belief that you are inherently inadequate, unchosen, or fundamentally flawed,
Perhaps due to a profound rejection or a steady drip of parental criticism early in life.
your internal map of reality dictates that love equals neglect.
Your reticular activating system will literally filter out potential partners who are emotionally available and supportive
Perceiving them as boring or lacking chemistry.
because they do not match the internal chaotic baseline.
Instead, you will experience an intense, almost magnetic pull toward individuals who will reliably trigger your deepest insecurities.
And this is where the mirror is most relentless. If your hidden belief is I am unworthy of being prioritized, you will consistently find yourself entangled with romantic partners who are emotionally distant.
Who belittle you or who constantly place you second.
In the arena of wealth, if your core belief is that you do not deserve abundance, or that success will lead to isolation from your peers,
You will continually encounter situations that reflect that fear.
you might be offered a massive promotion, but your subconscious will orchestrate a scenario where you insult the CEO at a dinner party.
Or you suddenly develop crippling imposter syndrome and withdraw your application.
The external world, the lost promotion, the terrible boss, the unavailable partner, is simply accommodating your internal belief system.
The subconscious mind fiercely prefers the safety of being right about its limitations over the vulnerability of being happy.
That is a staggering truth to absorb. The subconscious prefers being right over being happy.
And the natural, immediate human reflex when confronted with this mirror is to play the victim.
We complain to our friends, why is the dating pool so terrible?
Why do I always attract
Why
narcissists?
is corporate culture so toxic?
We expend massive amounts of energy blaming the mirror.
We try to shatter the reflection, hoping the next relationship or the next job will finally be different.
Completely ignoring the fact that we are the object casting the reflection.
But the sources don't present this to induce despair.
They enthusiastically argue that life does not reflect our pain out of cruelty.
The mirror functions this way because it is the only viable mechanism for healing.
The logic is undeniable. If a deeply held psychological wound, a fundamental belief of worthlessness, remains entirely hidden in the subconscious, it will silently dictate the limits of your existence until the day you die.
The only way to heal an infection is to expose it to the air.
By manifesting that internal wound as a tangible, painful external reality.
A devastating breakup, a catastrophic financial failure, a toxic work environment.
The subconscious wound is violently dragged into conscious awareness.
The pain you feel is the diagnostic signal.
It is life's way of forcing you to look at the unhealed program.
The recurring negative patterns in these four arenas will only cease when you finally recognize the mirror.
Stop attempting to manipulate the external reflection and genuinely transform the internal belief.
Once the internal code is rewritten from "I am inadequate" to "I possess inherent value,"
The external reflection must mathematically and logically change to align with the new object.
it makes you look deeply at the recurring friction in your own life.
If you examine the arena of wealth, are you always hitting a specific ceiling where an unexpected emergency expense magically appears to wipe out your savings just as you start getting ahead?
Look at courage. Are you constantly placed in professional environments where your ideas are stolen?
Testing your willingness to finally speak up and claim your space.
The question you have to continually ask yourself is, what hidden, unhealed belief about my own worth is this exact incredibly frustrating situation trying to force me to confront?
If life is a perfect, uncompromising mirror, what part of your own psychological face is it refusing to let you ignore?
Identifying the reflection is the crucial first step of liberation.
However, merely having the intellectual insight that a pattern exists is profoundly insufficient to break it,
Insight without action is just a deeper level of agonizing awareness.
which transitions us into the complex mechanics of actualizing structural change.
Framed around the physics of human potential and the emergence of the inner judge.
I found the physics analogy in the research to be a brilliant way to conceptualize this.
They compare human potential directly to the laws of thermodynamics and motion.
Every single person possesses immense potential.
But potential energy, in physics, is fundamentally dormant.
It is resting energy. If you think about the friction coefficient of a heavy object resting on a surface, it requires a massive, disproportionate surge of initial force.
Activation energy
Yes,
is to
dear.
break the inertia,
Potential energy does nothing on its own.
to convert it into kinetic energy, moving, impactful, reality-altering energy. A specific, undeniable sequence of forces must be applied.
The materials outline a rigorous three-step formula required to generate this activation energy and convert dormant potential into lived reality.
The foundational step is intention.
Intention is the act of setting the psychological GPS.
The human neurological system is a profoundly powerful target-seeking mechanism, but without a clear, definitive, and highly specific destination, it wanders aimlessly.
Defaulting to the path of least resistance.
You must clearly define the coordinates of what you are aiming for, whether that is a specific paradigm of romantic partnership, a defined career trajectory, or a precise financial milestone.
And as the texts aggressively point out, intention alone is completely impotent.
Having a destination programmed into the GPS doesn't move the vehicle 1 inch.
Which brings us to step 2, effort.
Intention without action rots into wishful thinking.
Effort demands taking daily, tangible, often unglamorous steps in the direction of your intention.
It is the raw neuroplasticity of action.
You have to signal to your own nervous system and to the reality surrounding you that you are serious about this trajectory by committing to the daily grind of execution.
And it is precisely at the intersection of intention and effort that the vast majority of individuals stall.
Because it immediately triggers the third and most difficult variable.
Courage.
The moment you define a new intention and begin applying genuine effort, you are moving out of psychological homeostasis.
You're threatening the established equilibrium of your invisible pilot.
And that disruption requires the courage to face what the sources identify as perhaps the most insidious obstacle in this entire process.
My inner judge.
The inner judge. The text has this chillingly accurate maxim: every dream comes with its own judge.
The exact second you decide to step out of your comfort zone, the moment you decide to apply the activation energy to turn potential into kinetic reality, an internal voice immediately wakes up.
And its sole objective is to completely dismantle your ambition.
I want to spend some time deeply deconstructing this judge.
Because the most terrifying thing about it is that it doesn't sound like a cartoon villain.
It doesn't sound like an enemy at all.
It sounds exactly like the voice of reason. It masquerades as objective rationality.
It is the judge's most potent and dangerous camouflage.
The inner judge rarely uses hysterical emotional appeals.
It uses cold, calculating logic.
But it is vital to understand that this logic is built entirely upon the biased foundation of your past traumas, your deepest fears, and the inherited limitations of your early programming.
Let us examine a specific scenario. Your intention is to leave a soul-crushing corporate job and launch your own enterprise.
You have done the market research, you have the capital, you are ready to apply the effort.
The very morning you plan to resign, the judge arrives.
It speaks in a calm, authoritative tone, saying, "What are you doing? Let's be rational."
Our family has always been salary earners. We do not possess the genetic risk tolerance for entrepreneurship.
Remember what happened to your colleague who tried this? He lost everything.
The macroeconomic climate is far too unstable.
You will deplete your savings, you will be publicly humiliated, and you will end up unemployable.
It meticulously uses your own history and highly selective data points from the external world as a weapon to assassinate your future.
It sounds so convincing because it uses fragments of truth to weave a narrative of inevitable catastrophe.
Precisely. And the absolute crux of overcoming this is the realization that this voice is not objective truth.
It is not an accurate oracle of the future.
It is simply your invisible pilot, your archaic protective mechanism, deploying its final line of defense to keep you safely quarantined inside the boundaries of your known comfort zone.
To the primitive brain, the known environment, even if it is chronically miserable, abusive, or unfulfilling, is considered safe because you have survived it thus far.
The unknown environment, even if it holds the promise of immense joy and success, is categorized as a deadly, unpredictable threat.
The judge is not a wise counselor. It is a terrified, overly aggressive bodyguard trying to lock you in the basement for your own protection.
So the courage step in the formula is not about vanquishing external enemies or waiting until you feel completely fearless.
It is the acute internal act of listening to the inner judge, hearing its meticulously crafted, logical-sounding arguments about why you are destined to fail, and deciding to take the physical step anyway.
It is the ability to say, I hear your concerns, I acknowledge the historical data you are presenting, but your conclusions are based on outdated software, and we are moving forward regardless.
If you negotiate with the judge, if you accept its biased arguments as objective facts, your potential energy remains permanently dormant.
And because confronting the judge is so psychologically taxing, we arrive at the profound reason why so many people actively choose to remain in a state of dormant potential.
It is vastly easier. It requires no activation energy.
However, living with unfulfilled potential creates a unique, chronic psychological friction.
This leads us into the text's exploration of how we survive that friction through the administration of self-anesthesia and the inevitable trauma of what they call the dark night.
This is a paradox that is fascinating to unpack.
In modern culture, everyone claims they want to be highly self-aware. We consume endless content on growth, we analyze our traumas, we seek enlightenment.
But the sources point out a brutal, uncompromising truth. Genuine awareness is agonizing.
It hurts profoundly. And it hurts because true awareness requires cutting off the psychological anesthesia we have been relying on for decades.
To remain stagnant within the confines of the comfort zone, while harboring a deep internal knowing that you possess unfulfilled potential, generates a low-grade, incessant psychological pain.
A pervasive sense of cognitive dissonance.
To endure that daily ache without actually undertaking the terrifying work of changing our lives, we systematically numb ourselves.
We develop highly sophisticated methods of self-anesthesia.
When we look at the mechanics of this self-anesthesia in daily life, it takes many forms.
The most common is the fortress of our fiercely defended excuses.
We intellectually sedate ourselves by saying, I would love to write that book, but I simply don't have the time with my current obligations.
Or, I would leave this toxic relationship, but the housing market is too difficult right now.
Or, the ultimate anesthetic, if I try my hardest and still fail, it will prove I am fundamentally inadequate, so it is intellectually superior to simply observe and critique others, rather than enter the arena.
But the texts also highlight behavioral anesthesia. We use defensive, chronic anger, constantly picking petty fights with a spouse to create a smokescreen that prevents us from facing our own terrifying vulnerability and fear of true intimacy.
We use relentless overwork, the endless dopamine loop of social media, or chronic complaining about the state of the world as powerful painkillers.
They numb the existential ache of not stepping into our sovereignty.
So when an individual actually commits to the process, when they apply intention, consistent effort, and the courage to defy the inner judge, they're actively ripping the IV drip of anesthesia out of their own arm.
And when the painkillers inevitably wear off, the resulting clarity is jarring.
You're left standing in the harsh light, staring directly at the reality that you, and you alone, have locked yourself in a cage of your own design.
You are forced to admit that the macroeconomic climate didn't stop you, your upbringing didn't ultimately stop you, your lack of resources didn't stop you.
You stop yourself.
This realization induces a severe state of psychological withdrawal.
And this withdrawal plunges the individual into what the literature describes as the dark night.
This term shouldn't be confused with simply having a depressive episode or a stressful month at work.
The texts are describing a fundamental structural collapse of the ego.
Exactly. The dark night is a phase of profound liminality.
During this period, the old limiting identity, the child adult who operated purely to appease the invisible pilot and avoid the inner judge's wrath, is actively disintegrating.
It can no longer be sustained because the anesthesia has been removed.
However, the tragedy and the terror of this phase is that the new, empowered, sovereign identity has not yet fully solidified.
You are stranded in the psychological void between who you were and who you are becoming.
It must feel like an internal earthquake.
Your old habits, your ingrained fear responses, and very often the people in your life who are comfortable with your old compliant identity will claw at you, desperately trying to pull you back to the familiar baseline.
The friction is immense.
The inner judge is screaming at maximum volume that you are losing your mind and destroying your life.
It is a period of maximum vulnerability.
But the crucial insight provided by the sources is that this internal earthquake is not a sign of failure. It is the absolute prerequisite for genuine transformation.
It is the concept of positive disintegration. You cannot construct a massive, expansive new architectural structure on a rotten, unstable foundation.
The foundation must be torn up.
The intense friction and despair of the dark night is literally the sound of structural psychological change.
Enduring this liminal space without sprinting back to the safety of the anesthesia is the absolute crucible of personal evolution.
Which brings us to the ultimate question. How do we successfully cross that void?
How do we stabilize the new structure and command the mirror of reality to reflect our new baseline?
The sources culminate in a final, overarching framework they call the Triad of creation.
They posit that to genuinely alter your external reality, you require absolute, uncompromising alignment across three distinct nodes.
Your deepest emotional core, your conscious mind, and your physical body or actions.
All three vectors must be pointed at the exact same coordinates.
This triad model is brilliantly effective at explaining why superficial attempts at personal development, like basic positive thinking or simply reciting affirmations, fail so predictably.
Let us analyze this through the lens of bandwidth and processing power.
An individual's conscious mind, the intellect, might logically deduce that they desire a healthy, deeply communicative romantic relationship.
The mind focuses on this goal. The individual might even stand in front of a mirror every morning and verbally declare, "I am ready for love. I am attracting a healthy partner."
But the texts argue that the conscious mind is only 1/3 of the triad, and remarkably, it is by far the weakest third in terms of actual manifesting power.
It is exponentially weaker.
The deep emotional core, the autonomic nervous system governed by the invisible pilot, processes information and regulates behavior at a speed and volume that dwarfs conscious thought.
If your deep emotional core still harbors the unhealed 0 to 7 programming that dictates marriage, inevitably results in screaming matches, betrayal, and profound emotional peril.
Then the core operates constantly on a frequency of terror regarding intimacy.
So you have a massive internal tug-of-war. The conscious mind is broadcasting, "I want a relationship," while the infinitely more powerful emotional core is screaming, "Relationships are a lethal threat."
In that conflict, the core will win every single time.
Its primary mandate is evolutionary survival, and it currently views a healthy relationship as an unpredictable, unsafe anomaly.
Therefore, the core will subconsciously override all of your conscious intentions. It will orchestrate the self-sabotage.
You will suddenly find a fatal flaw in a wonderful person, or you will inexplicably ghost them, or you will pick a fight over nothing to ensure they leave.
The core successfully protects you from the perceived threat, completely nullifying the mind's positive thinking.
This is the hidden architecture of failure.
So the diagnostic challenge becomes, if the core operates silently, beneath our conscious awareness, how can we possibly know when it is in direct opposition to our conscious desires?
The texts offer a highly effective somatic diagnostic tool utilizing the third node of the triad, the physical body.
The fundamental principle is that the body does not lie. It is the physical, real-time manifestation of the subconscious mind.
The practice they outline for reading these somatic markers is fascinating.
They suggest sitting in complete silence, removing all external stimuli, closing your eyes, and intensely focusing your conscious mind on your deepest desire, the specific goal you have been endlessly trying and failing to achieve.
As you hold that vivid intention in your mind's eye, you perform a rigorous scan of your physical body.
If your entire triad is fully aligned, the physical sensation will be one of openness, expansion, and calm readiness.
However, the diagnostic power lies in the friction.
If you hold that desired reality in your conscious mind, and your body suddenly reacts with involuntary nervous twitches.
If you begin yawning excessively, which is a known nervous system response to stress.
If you notice your breathing rhythm suddenly becomes shallow or restricted, or if you feel a distinct physical tightness in your throat, chest, or stomach.
That is your body acting as an alarm system.
That visceral physical reaction is the autonomic nervous system signaling a massive, conflicting subconscious block.
It is the exact somatic location where your deep core is utterly terrified of the very thing your mind is demanding.
It is essentially a polygraph test for your own subconscious.
You consciously declare, I want to be a wealthy entrepreneur, and your stomach instantly ties itself into a knot.
There is your irrefutable answer. Your core fears wealth because it violates a childhood rule.
So once we have used the body to detect the block, once we have brought it out of the shadows and recognized the inner judge's interference, how do we finally achieve ultimate alignment of the triad?
The synthesis of this final stage requires addressing all three nodes simultaneously and relentlessly.
First, the hidden fear in the deep emotional core must be acknowledged and psychologically updated.
This is where you apply the adult consciousness to the childhood fear, realizing that the original threat, the angry parent, the unstable home, is no longer present.
You might utilize the constructive atonement process if guilt is the anchor. You are, in effect, rewriting the pilot's base code.
You update the software, and then the mind's thoughts must be vigilantly governed to ensure they do not slip back into the old, comfortable neural pathways of complaining and victimhood.
But the absolute anchor of this entire transformation, the undeniable proof that the software has changed, is that the behavior, the physical body, must act in accordance with the new reality.
You cannot merely think or meditate your way to a new life.
Behavioral change is the only metric the subconscious truly trusts.
If you are attempting to align your triad for wealth, you must completely cease speaking the language of lack.
Complaining is essentially a verbal affirmation of your own powerlessness, reinforcing the old core belief.
You must begin managing the resources you currently possess with meticulous respect.
You must take tangible, often terrifying physical actions that a wealthy, secure person would take.
When the deep emotional core finally feels safe and updated, when the conscious mind is laser-focused on the intention, and when the physical body executes undeniable action, the friction dissolves.
And when that triad aligns, the results described in the literature sound almost miraculous, but they are entirely logical.
The external resistance seemingly evaporates.
The mirror of reality is mathematically forced to reflect the new, unified internal frequency.
The opportunities, the relationships, and the breakthroughs that were previously deflected by your own invisible force field of self-sabotage suddenly have a clear, unobstructed pathway to reach you.
It is the raw physics of aligning internal state with external action.
It is a staggering, comprehensive model of human behavior.
To summarize the breadth of what we have explored today, we began by uncovering the invisible pilot, constructed during the highly suggestible 0 to 7 year programming phase, and examined how it perpetually traps us as child adults serving hidden penances based on egocentric guilt.
We analyzed the biological necessity of enduring the intense physiological guilt required to set boundaries and individuate from our inherited expectations.
We then explored the profound concept of life as a perfect, uncompromising mirror, filtering reality through our neurology to reflect our hidden insecurities across the four arenas of relationships, wealth, health, and courage.
We broke down the physics of potential, realizing that intention and effort must be coupled with the extreme courage required to systematically defy the deceptive, logical-sounding arguments of the inner judge.
We acknowledge the agonizing process of removing our self-administered anesthesia, our favorite excuses and numbing behaviors, and the necessity of surviving the structural collapse of the dark night.
And finally, we decoded the triad of creation, learning to use somatic markers in the body to detect hidden blocks and force the alignment of our deep core, our conscious mind, and our physical actions.
But as we conclude, the most vital point to impress upon you, the listener, is that merely acquiring this intellectual insight is dangerously insufficient.
Insight without behavioral change is just sophisticated entertainment. The human brain only forges new, durable neural pathways through the friction of lived experience and physical action.
Therefore, the immediate application of this knowledge is crucial. Over the coming days, your task is simply to become a highly objective observer of your own resistance.
Notice the specific excuses you deploy as anesthesia when faced with a challenge.
Pay close attention to your body. Notice when your throat tightens or your breathing shifts when you contemplate your biggest goals.
Listen to the precise, logical arguments your inner judge uses to keep you small. Do not judge the resistance, merely catalog it.
Catching the invisible pilot in the act of sabotage is the indispensable first step to forcibly taking back the controls.
Catching the pilot in the act. I love that framing.
It makes you look at your own life and wonder just how much of your current reality is a choice and how much is an echo.
That is a powerful question.
I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over as you navigate your week.
We have spent this entire deep dive exploring how the external world flawlessly mirrors your internal state.
And how life's agonizing delays and recurring frustrations are simply the universe waiting for you to heal a hidden wound.
So consider this perspective shift.
What if the thing you are most desperate and impatient for right now, that massive career breakthrough, that deeply fulfilling relationship, that sense of absolute financial peace, what if it isn't actively denying you or avoiding you?
What if the reality you want is simply waiting for you to become the architectural version of yourself who can actually sustain it without immediately tearing it down through subconscious self-sabotage?
What if this frustrating delay is just the necessary time required for you to finally align your triad?
That is a profoundly empowering lens through which to view our current struggle.
It truly is. Thank you so much for joining us on this incredibly expansive deep dive today.
Take this profound awareness, endure the friction of your own growth.
Stand firmly in the center of your own life and start updating that software. We'll see you next time.